What if I told you the most reliable economic signal in modern history is now screaming that a financial super crisis is already locked in for the next 18 months? We've seen market crashes before, but what's coming is a collision of three distinct financial tsunamis, and our leaders have already used up every tool they had to stop it. Let's rewind the clock. The Great Depression. The market plunged 89%. A quarter of the workforce lost their jobs. Life savings vanished into thin air. It took a full quarter-century for share prices to claw back to their pre-crash peak. Then, 2008. The housing collapse triggered a global recession. Stocks were cut in half. 1 in 10 people were out of work. The government and central bank had to perform emergency surgery with massive bailouts and slashing interest rates to zero. The recovery still took 5 long years. But the next crisis won't be a single bubble popping. It will be the entire financial system experiencing a simultaneous failure in its core components, and the escape routes we used last time are now completely blocked off. To understand why this is different, you need to see the 3 distinct, massively inflated bubbles that are now pressing against each other. First, the stock market. The S&P 500's valuation is hovering at a price-to-earnings multiple that is almost twice its long-term historical average. This kind of extreme overvaluation is a rare red flag. We saw it in 1929, right before the floor gave way. We saw it in 2000, just before the dot-com explosion vaporized trillions. But the danger today is magnified by a concentration of power we haven't witnessed since the era before the Great Depression. Just 7 corporations now make up nearly a third of the entire S&P 500's value. If these giants stumble, they don't just fall alone, they pull the entire market index down with them. This creates a fragility that makes the 1929 setup look almost stable by comparison. Look at Nvidia. Its market cap has surpassed the total value of the entire German stock market. Investors are paying over 65 times its annual earnings. This isn't investing. It's a speculative mania driven by the belief that AI will change all the rules. They said the same thing about the internet in 1999. They weren't wrong about the long-term potential, but they were dead wrong about the valuations, and millions paid the price. The same mistake is being made right now. The second bubble is real estate, and the data shows it's even more inflated than the one that triggered the 2008 meltdown. Residential property prices are currently about 50% above their sustainable trend when measured against incomes and rents. At the 2008 peak, they were only 35% overvalued. Let that sink in. The current housing bubble is significantly larger than the one that nearly broke the global banking system. And that's just the homes people live in. The commercial property sector is already in a state of silent collapse. Office vacancies are at record highs. Buildings that were financed with cheap debt at 3% interest are now facing refinancing at rates of 7 to 9%. The math is brutal and unforgiving. This isn't a prediction. It's a mathematical certainty that defaults are coming, and they will hit the banks that hold these loans. Now for the third and most terrifying bubble, the one that truly makes this crisis unprecedented: the bond market. Government bonds have always been the safe harbor. When stocks crashed in 1929 and 2008, money fled to the safety of treasuries. But this time, the lifeboat is taking on water. The U.S. national debt has exploded to over $36 trillion, a staggering 125% of our entire economic output. The annual interest on this debt is now $1 trillion-plus anchor, the single biggest expense in the federal budget. The traditional safe haven is now the center of the storm. So what happens when the government's interest bill is this colossal? It has only terrible choices: savage spending cuts that would crush the economy, massive tax hikes that would do the same, or printing the money and unleashing hyperinflation. There is no painless way out. This is the triple bubble: equities, property, and sovereign debt all inflated to historic extremes at the same time. There is no safe asset to hide in. The parallels to 1929 are chilling. Back then, they believed new technologies like electricity and automobiles had created a new era where old rules didn't apply. This time is different, were the famous last words. Today, that mantra is applied to artificial intelligence. In the late 1920s, margin debt, money borrowed to buy stocks, reached insane levels. Today, the leverage is even more pervasive and hidden in complex instruments like derivatives, which now represent a notional value 10 times the size of the entire world's economy. The entire system is a house of cards built on debt. And here is the critical difference that makes 2025 more dangerous. Who gets hurt? In 1929, only about 10% of the population owned stocks. The crash initially wiped out the wealthy. Today, nearly 60% of American families are exposed through retirement accounts and direct investments. This won't be a crash for the few. It will be a collapse for the many. The banking system is also more vulnerable than it appears. Yes, we have FDIC insurance, but the fund has about $125 billion to backstop trillions in deposits. If several regional banks fail at once, that fund evaporates in days. The government would be forced to choose. Let depositors lose their savings or print the money to cover them, destroying the dollar's value in the process. It's a financial checkmate. The Federal Reserve is out of ammo. Reserve is out of. After the 2008 crisis, they could cut rates from over 5% to zero. They could invent quantitative easing to pump trillions into the system. Those tools worked then, but they created the massive bubbles we see today. Now rates are already low, and printing more money is widely understood to cause the very inflation we just suffered through. The Fed is trapped in a box of its own making. The government's ability to bail out the system is also gone. In 2008, national debt was manageable. Today, with deficits stretching to the horizon, there is no political or financial capacity for another multi-trillion-dollar rescue. The bailout option is off the table. The most accurate recession predictor, the inverted yield curve, flashed its signal starting in 2022. Based on every historical precedent, the recession it forecasts typically begins a few months after the curve returns to normal, which it recently did. That puts the trigger window squarely between now and the end of 2025. The countdown clock is on ticking, it's beeping. Look at the behavior of those who know their companies best, corporate insiders. Executives at the largest tech firms have been selling billions of dollars of their own stock. When the people running the engine are jumping ship, it's a clear sign they believe the peak has passed. Consumer debt is at a record high, with credit card balances soaring and delinquency rates rising. The American consumer, the engine of the economy, is financially exhausted. They cannot borrow and spend their way out of this one. So what can you do? This isn't about spreading fear, it's about fostering awareness. Understand the risks in your own portfolio. Question the narrative that this time is different. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes, and the rhyme scheme today is a tragic one. The convergence of these three bubbles creates a scenario with no historical playbook for a soft landing. If this analysis made you think, then do me a favor. Please like this video to help the algorithm share it with others who need to see it. And make sure you re-following Wines of Thought for clear-eyed breakdowns of the forces shaping our future. The storm is gathering. The only question is how we prepare.